Welcome, and thank you for joining us for this special edition of the ICT Newscast. I'm Mark Trahan. Indigenous journalists face unique challenges. What's it like for today's newspaper reporters and editors and broadcasters, and for those of us who practice our craft in this digital space? We start in Oklahoma with Gary Fife. ICT's Aaliyah Chavez talked to him in 2021 about his work as a journalist.
Native journalism goes back to 1828 with the launch of the Cherokee Phoenix. In 1969, the American Indian Press Association started. Its legacy lives on today through the Native American Journalists Association. In 1974, one of the Press Association's first reporters was Gary Fife. He's still in the business, hosting a weekly radio show, Muskogee Radio. He's hosted national Native news, first-person radio, and continues to be one of the nation's leading radio personalities. Welcome, Gary.
Welcome. Thank you. It's a pleasure to chat with you.
Well, your career has taken you all over Indian country, from coast to coast, and Alaska, of course. Tell us, what started your career in journalism?
I hit college right at the, I feel the peak of the civil rights movement here in the United States, and watching all of the activities going on around the nation with different minority people stepping forward. And I personally was wondering, where is the Native American presence in this movement? I also felt, of course, that since we have a federal relationship that no one else has, ours would be different, our presence. So I wanted to be a part of that, and I felt making a positive move for Native American people in the presentation of our information. Now, up till then, many of the Native publications and other journalistic efforts were what I would call advocacy, which is fine, which is wonderful, and it's needed. But I was in school to learn journalism, and I kept feeling that we needed a balanced report on these particular issues and people. In other words, both sides of the story. So that's what got me involved as a writer and photographer, and in my own way, an advocate.
Very recently, the Muskogee Nation passed protections for a free press, this balanced idea of journalism that you're talking about. Can you sort of talk more about that new initiative there, and how important it is really for readers and viewers in the Muskogee Nation?
Well, this is an issue that's plagued Native American journalists since, well, before you were born, I'm sure. The question of control and censorship has always plagued us. We've been a growing core of professionals who wanted to do this job in a professional manner, but we were headbutting against what I call dinosaur thinking of tribal leadership and national councils and people who raise that old question: if we own it, we fund it, we get to tell it what to do. And if we don't like this story, you're not going to do it, or else there's the door and you can go find another job. We've lived under that threat for 50, 60, ever since probably the days of Elias Boudinot back in the Cherokee Nation. And with a growing core of Native American young people going through college, who began to ask questions, as the rest of American youth did, and not accepting what the old rule was and asking why. And so this pursued my thinking for a long time, and thought, that's going to be kind of unpopular in many circles, including this older thinking, but the job has to be done. Our people need to be receiving balanced, fair, equal coverage. And so that was my goal in this profession.
That's wonderful. And just to recap, the Muskogee Nation essentially has protections in its constitution now for journalists to tell the stories in a way that is independent. Exactly what you mentioned, they're not being told by a certain tribal council person or any type of entity to tell the stories that they want to be told.
Right. That, of course, was your original question, and forgive me for going off the trail there. But To see this amendment installed in our Constitution, I think was a huge, massive relief on my heart and soul and dedication to this profession, to see it actually constitutionally protected from outside political, tribal, and emotional influences was so wonderful. I mean, our whole crew here just heaved this huge sigh of relief. I felt like we wanted to party, but we also realized the gravity of the situation and the responsibility that we have to carry. Now, many people in tribes all across the nation still say that, somebody's Uncle Joe on the council, or my, uncle or cousin in a tribal chief. They still tell you what to do, and we've got it here. But this is a wonderful demonstration of Muskogee citizens saying, no, we don't want this. We want these people to do a professional job and be free of any political leanings and influence. So that was the wonder of it all. As I say, it hasn't happened too many places in Native America, but I think this is going to be a growing trend, and it's just wonderful to see it in my lifetime.
Your career, as I mentioned, has spanned many years. You've covered many presidential administrations. Tell us, how do you think that the federal government has changed from the time you started versus now? What have been the most influential and monumental changes that you've seen in the federal government?
Well, we used to be governed very closely by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and whatever political climate was abundant then. They told us what to do, and how to spend the money and how not to, and many other things, including what kind of curriculum do you teach in your schools. And George Washington's still the father of this country. We had to say whose father in what country. So we saw that happening. That thinking began to evolve as American young people decided to ask more whys and why nots, and saying, wait a minute, this old way, just because it's been there doesn't necessarily mean it's the best. So we saw that change of thinking as more tribal governments began to assume and exercise their sovereignty. Things like the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act was a wonderful landmark and showed that Native people could control our own destinies. So we saw this paternalistic thing change into a more of a native control. And we're seeing a lot more Native people assume those controls in leadership positions, not only with tribes, but with national organizations. And what we're seeing here, Indian country today, is a wonderful example of where we've come, and seeing something we've talked about for decades, and saying we wanted to see this, and we have to let our people do their job. So that's probably the quick A to Z of what I've seen in my career, is a growing Native control over our own futures.
Mm. Let's talk about the future of Native journalism, Indigenous journalism. If you were talking to somebody who thought, "Hey, I'm a young person. I want to, see if this career path is for me," what do you say to them?
First of all, it's wonderful to see someone like you in this position, and it's replicated all across the nation. I go to a NAJA convention, and I don't even know most of these people. For me, that's a good sign, because more young people are interested in doing this. Now, to do this job, I jokingly have always said, first take your vow of poverty. And then learn as much as you can, read as much as you can, become involved. And when you watch the news in the evening, watch what they cover, of course, but how do they present it? That's just as important. And we're seeing that happen. Video used to be a lot of scenes where either it was the beautiful Native dancers at the powwow or it was the drunks. And I think you probably run across that in your life. But now we're seeing more of our own people step forward and take control of these stories and present them in a much more wonderful fashion. And that affects the mainstream media too. They're paying attention. I've even seen Indian Country Today quoted as a source for a story that aired here locally. So, That's kind of wonderful. They're taking us seriously, and I think that future is really bright.